Hi guys, Sean here from DigiDirect. Today we're going to be checking out the brand new Olympus EM10 Mark III. Now this is the newest in the Olympus OMD lineup. It's their entry-level camera below the EM5 Mark II and the EM1 Mark II. Obviously this replaces the EM10 Mark II. We'll see that even though it is an entry-level camera, it does have quite a few features. It's fairly well accomplished. And the differences between the Mark II and the Mark III, while not radical, are very well implemented. They do address some areas of improvement that the Mark II needed. And they do make the camera a lot more usable, which I'll touch on in just a moment here. Let's start though with a look at the body of the camera. So the body design here is very similar to the Mark II, which means it's very small, very compact, but still very stylish looking. It's got that retro look, which Olympus has on a lot of their cameras, which I find quite appealing. It comes both in silver and black. That combination of the small body size and the small size of Olympus lenses in general makes this really easy to just chuck in a purse or a backpack. It's not going to take up a lot of space. However, compared to the Mark II, it actually is a little bit thicker. I would say this is actually a good thing. It's not a big enough difference to really make a noticeable impact to the portability of the camera, but it gives a slightly chunkier feel to the grip. The grip is a little bit bigger, and the fact that it's thicker gives you a bit more of a handhold on it. On the side here, they've turned one of the function buttons that was on the Mark II into a shortcut button, and I'm going to touch on that in a moment. They've also given the D-pad buttons additional functionality, giving them a shortcut to ISO, flash, your drive mode, or your AF point selection, which is a nice addition, which was not on the Mark II. It's got the tilting LCD screen that we saw on the Mark II as well. It has a great looking 2.36 million dot electronic viewfinder that has 100% coverage, as well as a pop-up flash here. And then on the side it has HDMI and USB ports, but no headphone or microphone ports. And on the bottom it's got a UHS 2 compatible SD card slot, as well as the battery. And that battery is the same as what was on the Mark II, and it's rated at about 330 shots. So many of the changes here are under the hood. But first I want to mention something that hasn't changed, and that's the resolution of the sensor. So this is still a 16 megapixel sensor inside of the camera here. It does not jump up to the 20 megapixel sensor size that we've seen on a couple other Micro Four Thirds cameras these days, like the Olympus EM1 Mark II. Considering that this is still an entry-level camera, I'm not too cut up about that. 16 megapixels is still certainly adequate. It would be nice, certainly, if it was at 20 megapixels. But going on to what has changed now, first off, we've got a new processor in here, and that's the TruePic 8. That's the same processor that was put in the EM1 Mark II. So that's a big increase in power here on the EM10 Mark III over the Mark II. Next up is the image stabilization, the in-body image stabilization. Olympus has this on pretty much all of their cameras. It's a sensor shift stabilization technology, and they are hands down best in market for this. And they've improved on that again here in the EM10 Mark III. It's rated at 4 stops of image stabilization, which is an improvement over the Mark II and puts it in the same range as the EM5 Mark II in terms of its image stabilization. So improvement here on that. That's going to help you shoot in lower light conditions if you're shooting photos, because you can shoot at a much lower shutter speed than you would normally be able to without that image stabilization. It's also critically important for handheld video shooting. It's amazing for shooting handheld video. It also does work in the 4K video mode, which we'll talk about in a moment. So not a new feature in Olympus cameras, but an improvement over the Mark II, and very, very good to have. Looking at the autofocus system, it's been bumped up to a 121-point autofocus system compared to the 81-point autofocus system that was in the EM10 Mark II. That's about a 50% increase in autofocus points. That means the camera is going to focus faster, it's going to be more responsive, and it's going to be better at tracking. And indeed, that is the case. We see this. I certainly noticed it over the Mark II when I was shooting with this camera. It does decently well with moving shots, but I will say as a caveat, this is still an entry to mid-level camera. Don't expect this to be amazing at a lot of fast action type shots, but it is definitely a marked improvement over the EM10 Mark II, and quite functional for, again, your entry to mid-level users who are not exclusively shooting sports and action. This will get you by very, very competently. It can also shoot at 4.8 frames per second with continuous autofocus, or 8.6 frames per second if you remove the continuous autofocus. Now, I want to take a quick moment to talk about what's actually my favorite improvement on the EM10 Mark III, and that's actually not a spec improvement, it's a usability improvement. Namely, they've got a new shortcut button here on the side, they've got their new AP mode, and they've generally improved the menu system, the main menu system as well. So this shortcut button is the biggest thing. Now you can press this button in any mode and be immediately presented with a list of the most common options that you would want to access. In a manual or semi-manual mode, that may be like the info panel, the super panel. But in a scene mode, this lets you quickly choose a different scene setting. In an your art mode, you can quickly jump around between the different art filters. And in the AP mode, or the advanced photo mode, which is new on the EM10 Mark III, this lets you access Olympus's more advanced photo modes, like their excellent live composite mode, live time, multiple exposure, focus bracketing. These were all available on the previous models, but they were so buried in menus. They're really hard to find, and really people barely ever use them as that result. Now with this AP mode and the shortcut button, you can really quickly get into those. Overall as well, the menu system, they've trimmed it down quite a bit. They've removed a lot of menu options, which is a good thing. It's a huge usability improvement compared to the EM10 Mark II, and even compared to the EM5 and the EM1. I certainly hope that in future cameras that they release, they're gonna have something similar to this. But for an entry-level camera, it's really important to have intuitive menus and ease of use. Lastly, let's take a look at video, and the most notable improvement here is the addition of 4K video. So you can now shoot that, which the EM10 Mark II could not, even my EM5 Mark II can't. So you can get really crisp, high quality video. But putting that in combination with that 5-axis image stabilization that I touched on earlier means that you can easily whip this camera out, get some nice handheld shots that's gonna be nice and smooth, really crisp video, easy to use. For casual users, that'll be fine. The reason why it's not going to be great for pro users though is because this camera does not have an external mic jack or a headphone jack. Although I could see it as a B camera. If you had your own setup, you just wanted to whip this camera out and do some quick and dirty handheld shots that are nice and smooth and still in 4K, you could certainly use it for that. That's why I bought my EM5 Mark II, to have a quick and dirty B camera that can do handheld shots with that 5-axis image stabilization. And that camera can't even shoot 4K. Now you can with this. So the EM10 Mark III is an improvement to a camera that I already thought was pretty good. The differences between the Mark II and the Mark III, while not night and day, do give you a faster image processor, better autofocus system, 4K video, a better in-body image stabilization, and improved grip to the camera to make it more comfortable to hold, and those really important usability improvements. I think the EM10 Mark III is one of the best entry to mid-level cameras for someone who's looking for a balance of photo quality, a good feature set, nice manual controls that they can grow into, with a camera that is still very compact, but you can still change lenses, have access to a large lens selection, and so on. This camera has just come out. You can get it now in one of our stores if you want to give it a play and try it out. We've got stores in the Sydney CBD, Bondi Junction, Miranda, Chatswood, the Brisbane and Melbourne CBDs, and Cannington, Western Australia. You can also order the Olympus EM10 Mark III on our website at www.digidirect.com.au. Thanks guys, take care.